Speaking of upsetting people, I got my first strike on YouTube yesterday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks, thanks. It's from a video that I posted back in May of last year.
Wow.
So I was just sort of surprised that it took so long, but then I realized I just reached a certain milestone of people subscribing to my channel. I think that's probably what triggered the algorithm to look at my stuff more closely or something like that, you know?
It will be an algorithm. It's not like there's a human that's been through your stuff and said, oh, no, this doesn't meet the rules. It's all
Right.
done by AI. And so every now and again, they just comb through old videos and the algorithm flags up certain words or whatever that they don't like and take it down with no human input whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was pretty
Uh,
entertaining, honestly.
It's a bit like this reality, actually, which we can get into.
Please. Well, I'd love to start with a quote from a wonderful author, if you'll indulge me.
Okay. Is it C.S. Lewis?
No, not C.S. Lewis. You might recognize this author once you hear the quote.
Okay, go ahead.
It was just unfathomably tragic that evil and darkness had been allowed to take such a hold as it had during the past week, unmolested. But if that was just, but if that was what was needed to give a wake-up call to humanity, that just maybe would now take hold and see true cosmic justice put into effect in some twisted way, maybe it could be considered to have been worth it.
The Cause and the Cure.
Yeah, great book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I recognize that one.
Yeah, well, it was as I was reading, it was just like, oh, that's perfect, because that's definitely the way I look at this whole question of what's going on in this realm. How is so many of your amazing videos. Thank you so much for all your awesome talks, all your 10 videos that you recorded and the conversations you've been posting. They're
Well, by
awesome.
the end of the day, it'll be 11 because I'm doing God 11 today.
Oh, beautiful. Right on.
This is
But
the
yeah,
warm up.
it's very challenging, obviously, to see anything positive at the end of the story. How do we look at this scenario that we're in and find a benevolent creator at the end of it?
Right.
And that's, you know, the the crux of what you've been talking about. And uh, I feel, just from my life experience, the research I've done, reading through Cause and the Cure, it's like I was reminded after reading Gift and the Curse last year, just so much of what you've researched is along the same lines of what I've researched. And it's just so awesome to like read it in your novel, to see how you've weaved the storyline to share the wisdom that you've gained. But it's just like, man, there's so much amazing information out there, um, that can be applied to our lives, but we have to actually put it into use to see any kind of benefits from it. Otherwise, it's just information, right? And so, based on my personal experiences in my life with this journey, I'm I'm standing on the side of there's a benevolent creator at the end of all this, even though inside of the system it seems like there's not. And that seems to be where you end up with all of your talks, is that something bigger than this evil created the evil itself and the system. And it's hard to know how to talk about what that is and see a benevolent outcome in it. But there is evidence there for it, a lot, I feel. And so I want to talk about that because I don't feel that there a lot of that gets talked about a lot, the other side of it. There's plenty of evidence for the negative, but there is evidence for the positive.
Right. Well, maybe we should focus on that because it's very easy to find, as you say, evidence of all the bad stuff that happens in the world. You don't have to look very far for that. And if you're going to go where the evidence takes you, you are going to conclude, if you've got an open mind, no belief system to defend, no ulterior motive, that this is a realm presided over by anything but a loving, benevolent God. So it seems that whatever this place is, whatever we call life in this realm, was put into place by a being or a force or an entity or a group of entities that do not have humanity's best interests at heart. So it feels like a trap. It feels like a trap
Yeah.
to me. A louche farm, it's often referred to as.
Yeah.
So all the fear, the trauma, the suffering, the pain that goes on here is by design because this place has been set up to cultivate all of that. So we can come back to that if you like, but ultimately, let's start here. Something created us. And what gives me hope in all of this is the fact that we have consciences, most of us. Obviously, there are psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists who lack empathy and compassion and don't have consciences and don't consider the consequences of their actions. So anything is fair game for them. And they're quite happy to rampage through society, trampling all over other people, destroying their rights and freedoms, doing whatever they want. And actually, they get on just fine because this place seems to facilitate those kinds of actions. So if you're someone that is devoid of conscience and doesn't get troubled by how your actions might affect others, you'll get on great here and you'll probably lack a lot of the suffering and the obstacles and the problems and the hardships that those of us who have consciences do reap. But the fact that so many of us know the difference between right and wrong, we know the way we should be behaving, we know the ways that we shouldn't be behaving, we know what's wrong, and that guides us in our behaviors. So, where does that come from? That's coming from somewhere. And for me, that's coming from the original divine source, of which I feel we are all individuated emanations. So, before we got into this realm, into these physical bodies, we came from somewhere. And I feel that whatever the out there is, the spirit world, beyond the astral realm, that's where we originated. And that's where we need to get back to. So we hear a lot about this soul trap idea, the reincarnation soul trap loop. And we hear all these stories about the astral realm, where we first go after we leave our bodies. And it seems you have to get outside of that before you're truly free. So the aim has to be to return home to wherever we started from. There is evidence for a creator of that nature, just down to the fact that we're here. So
Yeah.
something sparked everything that there is in creation. That's why atheism makes no sense to me now. I was an atheist for many years. I was very bitter, but I didn't give a lot of thought to it, to be honest. It was during my DJing heyday. So I was traveling around, doing gigs, doing parties, just having fun, enjoying life. Didn't really think about this stuff. In more recent times, I've encountered a lot of personal hardship and struggles. And there's nothing like that to get your mind wandering and starting to consider matters of life and death and what this place is all about. So you need that trigger, it seems. You need that kick up the arse to start thinking about all this stuff. And I've given a lot of thought to these matters over the years. I've come to some different realizations this year to what was the case previously. So 2024 has been a real journey for me through my so-called God series of videos that I've been putting out. But if we look ultimately to where all this ends up, then there has to be some hope there. And the hope lies in the fact that we are, individuated units of this original God consciousness. I mean, without that, what would be the point, quite frankly? What would be the point of carrying on? Because if you accept that this realm is presided over by some sort of negative entity, we can call it Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, Rex Mundi, Yahweh, Satan, whatever name you want to put on it. If the conversation ends there, then what is the point? Because that's very bleak, it's very nihilistic, and there's no hope. There has to be some hope, not hopium, not manufactured hope for the sake of it because you need something to cling on to, but genuine hope based on a sober observation of the scenario and what we seem to be dealing with based on the evidence available to us. So if we want to take the conversation to its absolute conclusion, it's that we come from somewhere much better than this. This is not our home, and we need to make it our spiritual mission to return to that original home and get out of this place and avoid being tricked or coerced or persuaded to come back. Those of us that don't like this place anyway, because I don't like this place. You may have noticed from my videos. I don't like this realm of existence. I don't belong here, and I don't want to be here anymore. So some people might be fine with this place, but it's not for me. I want to get out of here, and I'm sure many people watching this will feel the same. So the question becomes, how do we achieve that? And what state of consciousness and spirituality do we have to attain during our time here so that we can be fully armed for what we may well encounter when we leave our bodies and these lives are done?
Cheers. Uh, I here's one thing I'm very curious about because I've heard you make similar statements in other videos that you've done. Uh, I think you're married, right? Or have been married?
Yeah, yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have children?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I I'm now married and I have children that I'm responsible for, but they're not my biological kids, but I'm learning how to be a dad now. And I'm learning about love on a totally different level now, uh, through relationship and through being a father or stand-in father anyway. And so I'm imagining there are parts of your life throughout the day that you do want to be here for, that you love, that you enjoy. Certainly making your videos, doing the things that you're passionate about, writing your books. Like these are parts of the experience of Mark Devlin that I would guess are parts of it that you do want to take with you when you leave, that are memorable in a positive way, that aren't just like get me the hell out of here energy. Is that fair to say?
To be honest, not really.
Okay.
When this life is done, I would be happy, to be honest, to just cease to exist in
Mhm.
any way. I feel that we have the capacity to make the choice as to where we go and what happens to us when we leave these bodies and return to source, because we are creator beings. We hear this a lot about how we can manifest our own reality through our applied intention, will, and consciousness. I struggle with that because there's certain scenarios that I've tried to manifest in my life. I'm told constantly, you're not doing it right. You're asking the wrong way. You want it too much. So there's a lot of flaws in this idea of manifestation. And I've got this coffee shop analogy, which I published a
Yeah.
few months ago. I need to make a video version of that actually with actors playing the part of the coffee shop
It's
girl
hilarious.
customers that go in. Yeah, I'm going to do that soon. I'm going to find some friends and film that because I think it'd make a really great video. But I do accept that we are creator beings at our core. This is why the so-called elites, the psychopaths that run this realm, this crazy place, spend so much time trying to affect our consciousness through predictive programming and propaganda and all the stuff they put in TV shows and movies and entertainment generally, because they're trying to steer our consciousness in certain directions. They want us thinking certain thoughts, cultivating certain belief systems and behaviors and the way we see the world and our place in it. So they're constantly trying to affect that. And it's a full-time job for them. It never stops. The minute they stop doing it, there's a very strong chance that humanity might start to head in some very different directions to what it is right now. So it's an incessant effort on the part of the sickos. There's a reason why they do that, because they recognize that we do have the capacity to a very large extent, shape the sort of experience we have. I mean, as I say, there are flaws in the system, but I still believe it can be done. So we can probably take that with us when we leave. I mean, I'm guessing because nobody really knows. We have near death experiences who've come back and told us what they've experienced before they were sent back into their bodies, because so many of them say that they wanted to stay in that beautiful, blissful place that they found themselves in. And the last thing they wanted to do was to come back into this hell but for whatever reason, they came back into their bodies. So we've got their testimonies. But beyond that, we don't really know what we're going to encounter and what lies beyond. We just have to give it our best guess. So I think you can probably create whatever reality you want. And if you decide you've just had enough of it all and you don't want to exist anymore, you can probably just go into oblivion. Some people might find that horrific, an idea. For me, it's quite comforting because I've not had a great time here on Earth. And I would be very happy to get out of it. I never want to come back in any way, shape, or form. So it's going to be my dedicated mission to ensure that that never happens, whatever it takes to achieve it. But in the meantime, as you say, I just have to keep plowing on. I find a lot of solace in my work. I consider myself very grateful to have landed into the line of work that I do because making my videos, doing my public talks, writing my books, going on podcasts like this literally keeps me going, keeps me alive. Then there's the family commitments as well. I do have a family and I'm obligated towards them. I can see the way human society is headed to hell in a handcart very quickly if things aren't done to at least stem the tide, at least slow the process down. So that's part of my mission as well. That's something I have to do for the sake of my children, for the sake of their generation and all the generations that follow. If good people sit back and do nothing in this situation, then the consequences are going to be very dire for those that come after us. So it is a very major obligation and commitment on the part of those of us who care enough what's going on to do whatever we can to, I'm not going to say stop it because I don't actually think it can be stopped. The best we can do is seek to reduce the amount of harm that is done, the amount of suffering that is reaped. I don't believe it can be stopped because of what I consider to be the true nature of this realm. It's set up to reward evil and wickedness and bad things, which is why they constantly thrive and have throughout known human history. So you can't fix this place because it's unfixable. But that doesn't mean we should sit back and do nothing and say, oh, well, what can I do? We still have a duty to do whatever we can during the time that we have here to make the best of the opportunities afforded to us in these lives. So that's what we all need to be finding ways of doing, those of us who care enough.
It's what you're doing, man. It's what I'm doing my best in my own way to do. Uh, in my reality, you're a form of a superhero in my reality
Well,
because of what you're.
that actually makes me very uncomfortable to hear because I completely denounce the idea of any heroes,
I know,
especially
and
myself.
not to suggest you're some sort of external savior type, right? But you inspire me. Your choices for what you do with your life inspire me to want to do better with my own journey. And it's the hero's journey. We talked about it last time. Joseph Campbell's hero's journey concept uh, is what I'm describing essentially. It's like, you go and you go on this journey and you become inspired and you bring that inspiration back to your community so that they can then go on their own journey. But if there was no darkness to upset your life, you wouldn't be this superhero in other people's lives to inspire them because you would be happy and everything would be blissful and whatever, right? In some utopian reality. So it's inevitable that the lives that you are living, myself and others that we know are living, are lives of a superhero life. It's not the one you see in a movie with a dude with a cape, but it's a journey that is the type of journey that you see in a movie where you go, God damn, that's fucking awesome. I want that for myself. I don't want to live this other mundane life. I want to live an exceptional life. And that's doing everything that I can so that when I die, I can look back and go, hell yeah, I didn't do like everyone else. I didn't stay in the system. I didn't stay a sheep. I did something different, did my best.
Yeah. Yeah, I get
That's
that.
that's a life worth living. You know?
Sure. It's very difficult for me to recall the state of consciousness that I was in prior to the one I'm in now. I've actually just put together an 18th anniversary version of my very first book. So long before the Musical Truth series, I actually wrote a book in 2006 and I self-published it in January 2007. And it was called Tales from the Flip Side. It was a collection of anecdotes and funny stories from my years in the DJing game. And it was written at a time before I'd woken up, to use that term, or embarked on a journey of consciousness, if you like. So I was very much stuck in a normie state of mind. And the only things that mattered to me back then were parties, clubs, tunes, uh, women, these kind of things. Just a very shallow, vacuous sort of lifestyle. But I'm putting it out again with a new foreword and with new footnotes from my current perspective, because I think people will find it interesting to read what state of mind I used to be in. And it's good for me to remind myself of that as well, because sometimes I forget. Sometimes it feels like I felt the way I do now about the world and about the true nature of this realm forever. And I haven't. It's only been since about 2008. It was just after that book was published, actually.
Mhm.
So, where I am now with all the stuff that I do, people often tell me, "Oh, it's great that you do so many books and talks and stuff, and you're an inspiration." And that's great that people find value in my work. I'm very thankful for that, and it makes it all seem worthwhile. But I often find myself thinking, well, actually, there's nothing really special about what I do. I'm just using my experiences and whatever skills or talents I have for writing or doing radio shows or whatever to do my best to put information out and try and help and inspire others. And I just feel like everyone should be doing this, not necessarily doing podcasts. I know not everyone is comfortable going on screen or going behind a mic, or not everyone can write a book. It's just not within their skill set, but everyone can do something. And so, you're doing your podcast, which is great. Uh, but so often people message me and they say, "Oh, yeah, I found so much value in your work. And I look at this author and this speaker, and I've taken on these teachings and stuff. And it's really helped me enrich my life." But if the story ends there, how's that helping humanity at all? It's not changing anything. That one individual may feel that they've enriched their life and they now have more knowledge and wisdom than they used to. But if they're not going to find some way of applying that to the world and putting it out there for the benefit of others, then we're simply not going to move forward. We're just in a state of stagnation. So everyone has to find some way of doing something to oppose this control system, which is attempting to take humanity down a very dark road, or at least to help and support others who are engaged in that work. And this can take all kinds of forms. It doesn't have to be podcasts and books. It can be designing websites. How about designing websites for an author and researcher that is putting information out and wants to disseminate that information in a more effective way? How about starting a TikTok or an Instagram channel for that individual, or a YouTube or a BitChute channel, so that they can get their videos out more freely? How about designing flyers for events that they might be doing, speaking events or whatever? How about just doing community stuff, linking with individuals in your area, growing food? If you can grow food and get that to others, that's great. If you can do odd jobs, if you can put up fences and walls and you can help somebody out that's doing great work, and you feel that you can't do that type of work, but you can support them in this way. There's all kinds of ways that people can get involved in trying to make things better for those of us who are very concerned about where things are headed and just haven't got our heads stuck up our asses and are just going out shopping and watching telly and doing not a whole lot else. That stuff doesn't move things forward. And also sitting on the knowledge that you've got and doing nothing with it doesn't help things move forward. So
Yeah.
just leave it there.
Yeah, I agree. I feel it's everyone's on the trajectory, and looking at the realm from the perspective of a benevolent creator uh, that created everything in the realm, including the evil, for the purpose of motivating and teaching and being the spark. This is something I mentioned in the email I sent to you a while back. Being the spark that motivates us to do something different, because that there's something about human nature that we tend to just do what makes us comfortable until something comes along that makes it impossible for us to do that anymore, and only then do we change.
Right.
So if that is, and that's to me that it has to be, well, nothing has to be, but for me to, in order to make sense of the evil, I have to go into the future, or not necessarily into the future, but into the past, to the beginning of the whole system, and start from outside of the box, if you will, in a place of benevolence. And like you've said a number of times, if it was up to you to create the realm, you could do a hell of a lot better job. What the hell? But
Right.
imagine that this is set up perfectly for some aim that we can't see because we're in the middle of it, and that the aim is benevolent. Imagine a world 10, 15 years in the future where the vast majority of people are on their awakening journey already. That is a world I would want to live in, where the control system has already crumbled, and who knows what it would look like. It would be chaos, but in a good way, where everything seems to be turning for good, and all the struggle and all the hard times and all the shitty things that happen are then worth it because things are turning around. It's not something we can see at this point.
Right. Well, there's nothing like having a fire lit under your ass to motivate you into action. So if you've got a nice, cozy, comfortable life, you're going to want that to continue. So there's a fairly strong chance that you'll never change your behaviors and step up and, fulfill your obligations because everything's great for you.
Yeah.
And this is the problem with so many people who have got cozy, comfortable lives, or they perceive them to be cozy and comfortable. There's no motivation for them to change anything that they do. You touched on there the observation that the creator of this realm could have done so much of a better job. And I've mentioned this before in my videos. And to me, it's very obvious. And I've been accused by those of a religious persuasion of claiming to be some sort of God or better than God when I make the observation that there's so many better ways that things could have been done. And it's not that at all. It's just that I'm looking at what we have. And specifically, I'm looking at a world in which, for some reason, it's necessary for all living things to consume the energy of other living things, whether it be plants or animals, just in order to live another day. So, what is that all about? I can see so many better ways that human bodies and the bodies of other living sentient beings could have been designed so that that's not necessary. So, what we do have is an absolute horror show, a bloodbath in the natural world every single day, with creatures hunting down and killing other living creatures just in order to survive. Just imagine the pain, the suffering, the trauma, the horror that's experienced by all those beings, and just, consider the magnitude of all of that when it's combined. Why is it necessary? Why can't we have bodies that don't need food, that can just live off prana, air? How about that? There's breatharians, of course, who claim that you can do just that, but it's a very acquired skill. And then just the human body itself, if we can get graphic for a moment, we urinate and defecate. What's that all about? Why is it necessary? Why do we have to take in food? Our bodies, our digestive systems process it. They take out the nutrients and the minerals, and then they chuck out all the crap that isn't needed in the form of this disgusting stuff that our bodies have to excrete every day. Why is that necessary? How is that in any way good and pure and meaningful? So I can see some better ways that bodies could have been devised there. I can see a better way that the natural world could have been designed without the need for predation. It's not difficult to see. And when you look at what we do have and the way it's been set up, the only logical conclusion that I can come to is that the creator of this realm wanted things that way because it wanted the suffering and the death. It's a necessary part of this construct. So that tells you that we're not dealing with a loving, benevolent creator. It's amazing to me the mental gymnastics that those of a religious persuasion will do, and this is pretty much all orthodox religious systems, to justify why God would have wanted this. But to me, the uh, the outlook is very clear, which is that this God doesn't want what's best for us. And this place is set up to cultivate all this stuff. You know, there's a claim in certain belief systems that it's there to provide a sustenance, a food source, spiritual food source for this God, this demiurge, or these forces that exist just out of human sight. And that may well be the case. But whatever view we take on things, it's pretty clear that this reality is horrific, and it's not something that I want to be a part of for any longer than I have to. I used to subscribe to this more new age kind of spiritual standpoint, which states that karma exists and is real, and there's consequences for our behaviors and actions. And the reason humanity is in such a bad state is because of the choices that humanity has made. So, in other words, we've chosen this, we've brought this about, this terrible state of affairs that we have, all the death and the suffering and the hardship in the world is our fault. That is the definition of gaslighting, making somebody feel guilty and responsible for something that they didn't actually create themselves. I'm not saying that we should rampage through life doing whatever we want and taking away other people's rights and freedoms. There is a moral code that we really would do well to adhere to. But I don't subscribe to the idea that we collectively have caused this anymore. I used to. So look around at all the stuff that happens in the world and look at where humanity is headed according to this New World Order master plan that they're trying to unveil with every passing day. How am I individually and you individually responsible for that? How do I and you individually deserve that? We don't, do we? And neither do many good people that I know who are trying to do their best, trying to live their lives morally, ethically, trying to consider the outcome that their actions are going to have on others. They don't deserve it either. Yet we're all lumped in together in collective punishment, and we're all having to reap the consequences of many others who don't care. Because, of course, there are people with cozy, comfortable lives who just go shopping and eat at McDonald's, come home and watch the soap and you know, go to bed, get up in the morning, go to work, do it all over again. And that's all they ever do in life or think life is all about. Their inaction is causing what's going on and the way humanity is headed. They've made it easier for the psychopaths to take things as far as they have. But there are so many individuals who don't deserve that. So it's not fair. It's not just. And it's not any kind of a system that can be morally justified. And again, to me, it's just proof that this realm is not here for our own benefit or our own evolution or growth. I've heard that one for many years as well. That's a more new age way of viewing things that, oh, in spirit soul form, before you incarnated here, you chose these lives and it's all part of your plan and it's what your soul needs to grow and evolve. It's just all part of the experience. So that way of thinking made sense to me for many years, but it no longer does. I wholesale reject that one now. And the example that I often give is try telling that to the parents of a young child who was abducted by a paedophile or child sex trafficking gang and was raped, tortured, and murdered. Tell them that was part of that child's life plan. Tell them that's what their soul needed to grow and evolve, and see where it gets you. What can you possibly learn from that kind of experience? What can a soul gain in terms of its evolution from going through that kind of horror? And even if that was the case, we often hear that, the Godhead, the consciousness, the one, the divine, split itself into all these individuated units of consciousness so that it could go through these individual experiences and find out what it's like to go through these things. So you look at somebody who's disabled in a wheelchair, and these people will say, oh, well, they've chosen that because they want to know what it feels like to have that kind of disability. And it brings about all kinds of emotional states that are going to help their soul's evolution. And then, the parents of that person or the helpers, the carers, learn compassion and empathy. So that's part of their life lesson. No, sorry, to me, that's just more gaslighting. So if consciousness wanted to know what it feels like to be paralyzed from the neck down and in a wheelchair all its life, how many times has that been achieved through human history then? Millions and millions around the world over the years. So, in other words, consciousness has learned that. It knows how that feels. It doesn't need to do it millions and millions and millions of times. What about animals, living sentient beings, that go to slaughterhouses and are killed in absolutely barbaric, horrific ways? If consciousness wanted to know what it feels like to be a cow or a chicken that goes to a slaughterhouse, didn't it learn that lesson centuries ago? Why does it need to keep repeating billions and billions and billions of times? So, no, sorry, that way of viewing things doesn't wash for me. I reject it. I reject all religious systems because to me, they're just methods of mass mind control designed by men, by humanity, for the purposes of social control. None of that makes sense. The only viewpoint that does make sense to me now is the observation that this realm was created by a being or a force which wanted to exploit the trauma and the suffering that we are all forced to go through to varying degrees. I mean, some of us are more fortunate than others in that our suffering is minimized. Other people have it far worse than me or many others. But in all our lives, there is suffering and hardship to some degree. It's not there to enrich us. It's not there to help us grow and evolve. It's there by design because that's the way this system was set up. So again, just circling back round to how this conversation started, the best we can hope for is to get ourselves out of here, do the best we can for others, live as morally as possible during the time that we're here, but make it our mission to escape this place and never come back. That's certainly my personal mission now. And that's the code that I'm now living by.
Thank you, brother. So to that end, how do you escape? You mentioned, because they in the tunnel, they try to guilt you into coming back, right? So do it now while you're still alive. Face the problems or the moments in your life where you were a dick or whatever, right, to somebody. Like bring that into your consciousness now and resolve those things so that when you're there in that moment, it can't be used against you. Like I've heard you talk about that.
Right. Well, again, we have no way of knowing what we're going to encounter when we exit this place, but we do have the testimonies of near-death experience survivors,
Yeah.
and their stories are alarmingly similar in so many cases. There's a real consensus there. So many of them say that when they leave their bodies, they suddenly feel very light. They're not weighed down by physicality. They're not in their bodies anymore. They're non-corporeal. And so many of them say that they experience these beings of light who present themselves in differing ways. So if you've been somebody who has adhered to a religious system all your life, you're very likely to encounter your religious figure of choice, your savior, because that's the mindset that you were in while you were here. So, for instance, if you're a Christian, you're going to encounter the figure of Jesus. If
Mhm.
you're a Buddhist, it's going to be Buddha. If you're a Muslim, it's going to be Muhammad or Allah presenting himself in some way. If you have not been religious, you are likely to encounter a being cloaking itself as a loved one that's passed on, your dead mother, your dead uncle, whatever it may be. This is what NDEers have said they've experienced. And so often they say that they experience this tunnel of brilliant light, like nothing they've ever experienced on Earth. It's so brilliant and so bright that it's difficult to put into words. And these figures seem to be beckoning them to go into the light. And again, for many years, having heard these stories, I thought, well, that's what we're going to experience then. And obviously, you go towards the light because that's how you move on. The idea of the reincarnation soul trap, which is really gaining a lot of traction in alternative research circles right now, is that these beings who present themselves as Jesus or your dead mum or whatever are able to take on that form by way of trickery and deception. And they're beckoning you into the light because that's how you get recycled. That's how you get into the reincarnation loop and you get put into a new life, a new body. I don't know the mechanics of how that works, but this is the theory. And
Mhm.
again, I'm not claiming that this theory is watertight. I'm not saying that this is 100% the truth because how can I know? I'm just saying that this is what so many of them come back to us and say that they're experiencing. And part of the getting beckoned into the tunnel of light involves what's referred to as a life review. And this is where these beings, and the idea is that they're not God, they're uh, subservient minions of what you might call the demiurge. So in the Gnostic tradition, they were referred to as archons. So they're entities that are doing the bidding of whatever force created this realm. And they show you your life. They've got some way, some method of presenting to you everything that you did, everything that you experienced in the life that you've just exited. And there's a focus on the aspects of your behaviors that you're not proud of. So they guilt trip you and shame you by showing you ways, times when you were less than perfect. The idea is that you look at the way you behaved and you think, oh my God, that was terrible. The way I treated that person, the way I made them feel, I'm so ashamed of that. And they'll then say, well, you need to put it straight because you did these bad things in your life. You need to go back and fix it. There's work you still need to do. The mission is not yet complete. And they're trying to get you to consent, it seems, to going back and doing it all over again and trying to fix your karma. You can't fix it. It's unfixable because you never stand a chance. With any life you come into, you're going to behave in certain ways because of the way this place is set up. It's very challenging here. It's very difficult to get through. Even if you were a monk in a monastery in Tibet who spent 12 hours a day praying and chanting and meditating, there are still going to be things that individual will do that are less than perfect, because nobody can be 100% perfect because of the way this realm is set up. So they're always going to be showing you aspects of your life that were less than perfect and trying to get you to come back on that basis. So, one technique which I've heard discussed by others, which I've started to do myself, is to do my own life review and to be very honest and candid about it, and to go to those dark places and to confront things that I've done that I'm not proud of. I mean, it's not just that. The life review I'm doing is going back over everything I've done, good and bad, and just trying to get it all down, recall it, and face it. Just be honest about it. But I am focusing on aspects of myself and things that I've done that I'm not proud of, that I would do differently if I had my time again. And I'm getting it down on paper in my own handwriting, so it's very personalized. And even if it doesn't help me to find my way out of this realm when my time comes, I'm still finding it very cathartic to face up to these things and just be very honest about it. Just get all that dark stuff out of the shadows into the light, face it full on, accept that it happened, and move on. So that's something I'm doing. It may work for others. It may be something they don't want to do, but it's an option. It's there if you choose.
I love it because thank you for clarifying that. I love that practice because it's time spent doing our best to be a good person in reviewing everything we've done and looking at, oh, fuck, I could have done that differently. I could have done that better. I mean, that's what we're always doing anyway. When we're practicing something, writing something, we edit something, we mess with it to make it more perfected, right? So that makes sense to me. If the tool being used against you in this tunnel is guilt, then if you can absolve yourself of that while you're here, then it can't be used there, right? Makes
Yeah,
sense to me. I'm
sure.
curious.
And
Go ahead.
another observation that I've made in recent videos and on shows that I've been on is, since coming to this way of viewing reality, although it can seem very bleak at the outset, I've found that it's actually made me a more moral person. I feel that it has, more conscientious and more attentive towards the way I conduct myself. So you might think it might drive an individual the other way, and it might make you very nihilistic, very cynical, and you just think, well, fuck it, what's the point? This place is set up for fucking pain and suffering anyway, so I might as well just contribute to it and do whatever I want. What the hell? Who cares? But no, I'm finding it's having the opposite effect on me, because I'm accepting that we're all here possibly against our will. We're all in this suffering pit of hell. We're all having to go through these challenges together. So we may as well support each other, hadn't we? Because we're all in the same boat. We're all brothers and sisters together, however we got here. And that goes for other living sentient beings as well, because they're in this place the same as we are. So if you find a spider in your house, don't kill it. Why do you need to kill it? Just get it in a jar or something and get it out. Uh, I make special effort not to tread on ants and insects when I'm out. I'll if I'm putting my foot down and I see an insect there, I'm like, whoa, whoa, and I'll move my footprint to the right to avoid stepping on that insect. Because to me, we're all living, we're all sentient, and why inflict more pain and suffering than needs to be there? Don't we want to reduce that? Isn't minimizing pain and suffering what we all want? Isn't that the kind of world we'd prefer to live in? So, interestingly, this viewpoint has driven me in that direction. And that to me, again, is evidence that we come from somewhere better than this, and that we are, at our core, divine sparks, if you like,
Mhm.
aspects of that original creator God. So I don't deny the existence of a creator God, a creative force. It's self-evident that there has to be one because we're here. Whatever this place is, there is existence. Things just are. I don't subscribe to the Big Bang theory that everything came out of nothing spontaneously and randomly. That's complete nonsense to me. Everything has been put into place by an original creator God. So this realm, I believe, was created by a lesser god, a force which is referred to as the demiurge and all these other names. And that's not the original true God. It's a being which wants to be like the original creator God, but cannot possibly be because it's much less than that. So the original creative force is out there somewhere. I mean, one question I do have, which I've been asking all year, is how could the original creative force behind everything have allowed this realm to have been created, have allowed this demiurge being to have usurped it and somehow created this place and forced or tricked or coerced us souls into incarnating to undergo these lives. Where was that God? You know, was he or it asleep on the job, reclining on a hammock, sipping on a cocktail while all this was going on? So that's an outstanding question, which I've not been able to answer in my mind so far. But I do accept that there is a God which is far greater than this demiurge fuck thing. I curse it every day. I curse that fucking thing, whatever it is, because I'm not cursing God. I'm cursing
Yeah,
Satan or whatever it is.
right.
But yes, there's something better out there, and we need to return to it, and we need to find a way of achieving that. So some feel that when you leave your body, you encounter the astral realm, which is the one that lies just beyond this one. I've heard many claims and accounts about that, that it's just like Earth. It's another expression of it. It's just slightly less dense. So it seems, if these accounts are true, if that we need to get beyond that to, return to our original home.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Maybe the consciousness that we will carry with us when we die, so called, is going to be enough to get us out of here. If we're able to take these states of mind with us, then we're going to be able to resist any methods of deceiving us, tricking us into coming back to this place if we choose to go beyond it. Maybe just that consciousness, that knowledge, that determination, that will is enough to enable us to move beyond. I'm hoping that's the case, but I think it probably is.
Uh, have you ever had a plant medicine experience like mushrooms or ayahuasca or anything that's like a psychedelic experience?
I've done mushrooms a couple of times. I didn't have a great time because I was not in a great place when I took them.
Hmm.
So it probably wasn't the best
Right
time.
on.
But yeah, had a couple of pretty bad experiences because it brought all the trauma to the surface. So
Okay.
uh, it caused me to, it just amplified a lot of the difficult stuff that was there in my consciousness. So
Mm.
yeah, didn't have a great time on those. I am up for the idea of, having a plant medicine experience, not mushrooms, something else, maybe
Yeah.
ayahuasca, something of that nature. I'm definitely up for the idea when I'm in
Yeah.
a slightly better place.
Right on. Yeah, I asked that because and I've had plenty of difficult experiences with plant medicines as well, but I've had some incredibly profound positive experiences that, for lack of a better description, it's like I'm getting to experience the other side. This idea that
Which
you
ones
hear
did you
about.
do?
I've taken mushrooms. I've used ayahuasca and also wachuma, which is cactus, mescaline-based cactus, as well as cannabis, but that's not considered to be a psychoactive plant, but I think it is, especially if you eat it. versus smoking. But the experiences I've had that were positive experiences were took my consciousness to a place that is so much greater than this existence in the body that when I came back from it, it's very much like the place that near death experience people describe. And then I had my own version of a near death experience, although I don't really feel like it qualifies a near death experience because all that happened was I fainted in an acupuncture chair. But while I was while I was unconscious, I had a similar experience of this just sensation of love that's too big to describe. It's so much bigger and brighter and huger than anything that could be described that the idea of pain and suffering just dissolves in it because it's so huge, if that even makes sense. But I remember coming back to my consciousness after I fainted. And the first thought that I had was, wow, this feels amazing. I was just like, from the outside, my friend described that I went from being totally out to just this huge shit-eating grin on my face, like, "Wah." And then as soon as I felt that, I also at the same time felt being back in my body. And immediately I was like, no, I don't want to be back here. This feels way better. And then it wasn't like a voice in my head or Jesus or whatever. It was just this thought form that was like, nope, you've got more to do here, which you hear this all the time. Nope, it's not time yet. You've still got more to do. And however it was communicating with me, it made me laugh. I was like, all right, cool. But I get to come here later, right? Yeah, definitely. This is where you're from, right? But you still got more to do here. And it's cool. Don't worry. It's going to be okay.
May I ask, do you feel that was coming from your higher self, or were you being gaslit by some other force to come back here into your body?
Yeah, I feel like it was a benevolent energy. Definitely a positive, loving, creative energy. It wasn't something that felt like it was trying to convince me of anything. And it was a sensation I had after having already had that sensation with plant medicines. So it was like I had already touched it. And in the plant medicine experience, it's like I'm being shown something difficult that I experienced in the past and I'm feeling guilt for it. But it's like the medicine is showing me a way to feel love and see that there's a lesson there and see that I can become a better person. And all these things are supporting me, not trying to push me down. So the experiences I've had that I can't logically describe are of a loving energy, not a evil energy.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
When you took the ayahuasca, were you in a good place yourself, would you say, in life, spiritually? You were feeling good about things?
definitely. I spent 4 years researching ayahuasca before I felt comfortable taking it. Um, I, I started out very slowly with mushrooms, very small doses. I was very scared of what was going to happen. Wasn't ready. So it was a while before I was ready for ayahuasca because it's not for lighthearted. It's not necessarily fun.
There's an irony in your name, Patrick Tripp.
So is there in yours now?
Is Patrick
Devlin?
Tripp your real name?
Yeah, it's my real name.
Wow, isn't it incredible? So you're talking about, going on trips there.
Yeah.
And yeah, people raise this so often with me. Oh, mark of the devil in. He's got the mark of the devil in him. He's telling you. So I'll set the record straight there by saying my dad was adopted. So Devlin was not his last name. He had a different last name. He was adopted by an Irish fella. And anyone that knows anything about Gaelic Irish names knows that they get anglicized. So Devlin is an anglicization of the original Gaelic, which was O apostrophe Diobhlain. So in the Gaelic pronunciation, it sounds something like Devlin. So that's the way the word got changed. So it doesn't mean I've got the devil in me. And Mark was a very popular name when I was born in the 1970s. So that's how my name came about. But I do think there's a sense of irony there because I talk about occult symbolism and Satanism in the music industry and stuff like that. And my name is quite similar to a lot of that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, to me, this ties in with the way I see the nature of this reality. So you hear a lot of people stating that it's a kind of simulation, it's like a virtual reality video game matrix. And that's actually how I see it. I think it's made up of coding, like computer coding. So for many years, I heard people talking about energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And he was right because we all exude energetic frequencies at different levels, and we can attract towards ourselves scenarios, happenings that resonate with our energetic frequency. But you can also make the analogy that computer coding applies here, computer style coding. And so it's a crazy thing. I was thinking the other day about matters of life and death and mortality as I was driving on the motorway. And a van overtook me, and I just happened to glance at the name on the side of the van, Pure Cremation. What were the chances? Then I was thinking the other day about a friend of mine who I was going to do a podcast with. So I was considering what questions I was going to ask him. A van overtakes me. It's got his very name on the van. No one's going to tell me that that's just random coincidence. What's happening there is because of the way this reality is coded, the coding is arranging itself and forming itself around you and your experiences. So the name on that van carried certain coding, or you could say an energetic frequency. And because I was thinking about this guy with this name, the coding brought that into my existence. There's no way that was a coincidence. What are the odds of that being a coincidence? Billions to one, probably. How many times have you woken up in the morning with a song in your head, and then later that day you walk into a cafe or a shop or switch the radio on, that very song is playing, and it's a song you haven't heard for years, and it's a song you don't normally hear played on the radio? What are the odds of that being a coincidence? Billions to one. So to me, it's testament to the true nature of this reality at its core, which is, if you want to use that analogy, computer coding arranging itself in the way it does a computer software program or a virtual reality game, something of that nature. So that's the nature of this reality. And you mentioned there getting outside of it and going to something that lies beyond. There's no coding there. I think you would agree. There's no density. There's no space, time, solidity. That doesn't exist outside of this realm. The passage of linear time doesn't exist outside of this realm. It's part of the construct of it because we have to age. If we don't age and our bodies eventually decay and give up, then there'd be no physical death. And so this reality wouldn't be able to keep functioning if the fear-based energy that we exude is the food source for the entities that created it. So these things are only present in this realm, but they're not present when you go beyond it. NDEers talk of feeling very light and seeing this brilliant light and feeling this bliss and this euphoria that's like nothing they've experienced on Earth. So the fact that you have people with interesting names supports the idea of this computer coding type situation arranging itself. How about Mark Passio? I know he's not everyone's cup of tea because he rants and shouts a lot, but think about his name. Passio. What does that mean? When you take it back to the original Italian, it means passion, passionate. Is there a more passionate individual out there than that guy when he starts ranting? And it's there in his name. And you get so many examples of this. What about the Japanese guy who talked about water having consciousness? Dr. Masuro Emoto.
Yeah.
Emoto, as in emotions, emotive. That's what he spoke about. He spoke about consciousness and spirituality and stuff. He was very emotive, and it's right there in his name.
Yeah.
And there's so many other examples of that. So I don't think there are entities who are poring over the fine detail of this reality every minute of the day. So we're not being monitored by these forces. And they're not saying, okay, Mark Devlin driving on the motorway, I'm going to send a van that says pure cremation on it past you in your car. So there you go. That's you. Patrick Tripp over there. I'm going to make this happen to you. No, the construct has been set up. It's been coded in a certain way, and it's just left to run. It's left to run by itself. It's automated. So you were speaking earlier about you had a YouTube channel taken down because the algorithm spotted something it didn't like
Mhm.
and it took it down. There was no human looking over your channel and say, oh, no, no, we can't have him saying that. Let's delete that. The algorithm did it, the AI.
Yeah.
No human input required. It just happened because the system was set up, the construct was set up that way. And that applies to these lives in which we find ourselves. I've often commented to friends that each of us seems to have a personal, bespoke method of hardship and suffering that's set up just for us. It's designed just for us. We undergo hardships and situations that only apply to us. Our friends don't go through these things.
Mhm.
If you look at their lives, they go through different types of shit that you don't, because that's their own personal, bespoke method of hardship and suffering. So each of us has these individual situations, and they're individual to us because the coding is arranging itself around the way we're coded and what we're exuding by way of our energy. So these are personalized, bespoke situations, like our names, and they support, for me, the idea that this is like a virtual reality simulation type scenario. I didn't feel that before this year, but that way of looking at things and that way of ratifying and quantifying this reality makes a lot of sense to me now.
I appreciate that perspective because in that reality that's virtual, all this suffering is not real. It's all virtual suffering.
It bloody feels real when you're going through it, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But it's not real. It's all just a simulation, right? That's another part of the research for me is being able to remove my emotional reaction to the difficult energy and think about things dispassionately. And in that way of looking at things, I can see a lot of humor in the darkness. And some of the darkest stuff is the funniest stuff. It seems like God is the funniest comedian there is, whatever God it is, you know? Because it's like the shit that makes me laugh the hardest is the darkest stuff there is, you know?
Right? Yeah, you got to find humor in it.
Yeah, and
I'm a
that's
big
part of the
fan.
medicine.
I'm a big fan of Monty Python. Are you into
Yeah,
their stuff?
yeah, I love Monty Python.
Exactly. So Monty Python, I don't trust them because I think they're all stooges of the system. They all went to Oxbridge, and they're very system minded. They've been pushing system agendas and stuff, but
Mhm.
they do they mock reality. They mock society. They satirize it because ultimately this world is completely and utterly absurd. It's ridiculous. And if you can take a step back and just have a fucking good laugh at it, that can be very cathartic as well.
Yeah.
So I'm recording my God 11 video soon, and it's going to consist of clips from Monty Python's The Meaning of Life movie. It's not their best movie, that would be The Life of Brian, but there's some very potent observations in that film. So I'm going to be including several clips and then commenting on them
Right on.
and observing how the Monty Python guys knew.
Yeah.
They knew what this place is because they actually talk about it in that movie. They call it the meaning of life. And there are references that could be construed as them knowing that this is a construct that's been set up to cultivate certain things. And it's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's flawed. It doesn't make sense. It's nonsense. These lives are just ridiculous. They knew that. And there is great humor to be found in it, actually, because this place is completely and utterly ridiculous. It makes no sense. Much of what the psychopathic so-called controllers do is just ridiculous as well. And yeah, there's great value in being able to have a good old laugh at it, I feel.
Yeah. It for a person who is in it, and still focused on the news at night, it's not possible. They can't see it that way. But if you step back far enough and stay out of that, blinders on mentality long enough, then all of it can be seen as hilarious. It's possible to see it that way. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's appropriate to see it that way. And it definitely depends on the company you're keeping and all that. But man, there's some real humor in the tragedy. And just to comment on something you said earlier, this process that you're going through is making you a better person, making you more conscientious. To me, that's evidence that the purpose for the darkness is to push us into the light. And the whole thing about the realm being usurped by a lesser god, like, again, just from my very brief experiences with whatever that is out there, that's the biggest of the big, it just seems impossible that that creative energy could be tricked in some way by something that it created, because whatever is running this darkness was created by this creative force, seemingly. I don't know, but that stands to reason that it created everything, including this darkness. So how could this darkness overtake it? Doesn't make sense to me.
Well, an observation that I heard Eric Dubay make some months ago. I've been watching Eric Dubay's videos. I had a conversation with him in March of this year, which I thought was really great. He made the observation that things aren't balanced in this reality. So people will say, oh, you can't have light without darkness. You can't have joy without hardship and suffering. You can't have male without female. There's duality everywhere. So yeah, duality is obviously a part of this construct. It's been built into the coding. There is duality,
Yeah.
but it's not balanced. There has always been way more suffering and hardship and fear and trauma, mainly fear, because it's all derivatives of fear. All this stuff is basically fear in the world throughout known human history. There's never been a point that we know of where there's been no war, no famine, no natural disasters, no struggles. What about natural disasters? Just going back to why a benevolent God would design bodies that need to consume other living beings to survive. Earthquakes, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes. What's the point of them then? They kill large numbers of people and they're natural. Why would a loving God create a reality where these things occur? That's another question.
Yeah.
But Eric Dubay was saying that if you consider joy and pleasure, if you think about the greatest pleasure you could possibly experience, some people might say that's a sexual thing. Others might say it comes from something else, a great piece of music or whatever it may be, a wonderful piece of food. Would you trade a minute of enjoying that with a minute of the worst pain and torture and suffering that it's possible for a human to go through? So in other words, would you take a minute of euphoria, but the price you have to pay for it is a minute of this torture? I don't think there's one individual in their right mind with all their mental capabilities intact who would say, yeah, I'll take that deal. Nobody would, because they wouldn't want to go through the horrible stuff in order to experience the nice stuff. And just think about, for example, the human orgasm, right? So For a male, that lasts a few seconds. I don't know what it's like for females. They'd have to advise. But, a few seconds. That's it. And that's like many people would say that's the height of physical pleasure that we can experience. Then think about if you're unfortunate enough to get cancer, you could suffer horribly bodily for years and years and years from that condition. So things don't seem to be equally weighted. There's more of the suffering than there ever is the pleasure. So if we had a system where the duality was fair and just and was there to balance everything out, would it not be more in balance and not unfairly weighted towards the suffering and the hardship? To me, that's another piece of evidence that the force behind this place in which we find ourselves is not benevolent, is not loving, does not want the best for us. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm not trying to contradict anything you're saying here, and I appreciate your positive outlook. Uh, I really hope that you're right and I'm wrong. I would love that to be the case. And I think it's great that you're able to find the good in this situation. Maybe it's because you've done more plant medicine than me, and more introspection. Who knows? So yes, I'd love to be wrong about my standpoint, but that's where I'm at based on what I've been able to see. But
Mhm.
again, I would always want to circle back round to what I said at the start, which is that there's hope and there's brightness and there's optimism here from, again, the evidence that there is a creative force which is far greater than the sick, evil fuck that devised this one. So there's the hope. If I didn't have that, I don't know where I'd be. But it's not hopium. I've not
Yeah.
forced myself to believe that this is the case. This is genuinely the end point that I've arrived at based on what I've been able to see and intuit and reflect upon.
Well, and that hope is inseparable from the darkness, you know, because you feel it and you sense it despite all the darkness that you know about. It's still there, you know. So there's a balance in that.
Well,
And I
it kind of
think,
has to be, doesn't it? I
yeah,
mean,
and I
you
think
have
that
people, you have people that take their own lives, and obviously they've arrived at a point where they feel there's no hope, there's no point. All hope is lost.
yeah,
Uh, but no, there has to be hope. Otherwise, why would we carry on? Why would we get up in the morning every day and go through another day if we didn't feel that there was something hopeful at the end of it? Why would we do that?
yeah, and I think it also depends on the how far back we're standing from whatever issue we're talking about. You know, the wider the lens, the more complete the story, the more sense it makes for the difficult parts of the story. Why, in any movie, in any novel, there's difficult things that happen, and those things shape the character in certain ways, and that leads to the climax of the story and whatever outcome is going to be, either positive or negative outcome, but they're inseparable, and it requires the entire story to unfold before the whole thing can be seen in its completion. So,
Life is a novel.
and the imbalance in this aspect of let's say the last 5,000 years of recorded history, however much of that's true, who knows, right? But it certainly seems to be very masculine dominated, and there's indications that previous to that time it was a more balanced or even matriarchal type of existence in human culture. But either way, it's out of balance now, and it's seemingly going to come back into balance or be destroyed one way or the other in the next few years. Things are going to get interesting, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of 2030, is that things are coming rapidly to a shift point that we'll look back on this time and go, yeah, there was a need for a rebalancing. Definitely.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen in 2030 and beyond, if we allow it, is going to be more of a physical 3D type thing than a spiritual consciousness type thing, just from the fact that we can see where the New World Order master plan is headed. They want smart cities everywhere. They want social credit systems linked to digital payment methods and digital passports, and they want to chip everyone. They want more surveillance, more monitoring, the smart grid, computer of things, the Internet of Things, following everything that we do. That's all very dense 3D reality stuff, but it's coming. It's coming if we don't stop it collectively. And that's why I say we shouldn't sit on our asses and do nothing and say, oh, well, this place is fucked. What can we do? There are things you can do. I don't believe ultimately this place can be fixed. The best we can hope for is to reduce the damage. It's damage limitation, and there are things that can be done, especially those of us that have children. Think about what the next generation is going to have to live through if our generation doesn't step up and do what it must to limit the amount of damage incoming.
Yeah. There's I recently reconnected with a friend that I hadn't talked to in about 10 years, and he's an atheist. And he, just in catching up with him again, I'd learned that he's currently looking to buy a piece of property. He's in Italy, out in the middle of nowhere, and do his best to build a sustainable place, off the grid, where he doesn't need to have any reliance on outside sources to survive. And that's all based on research he's done since 2020 that has nothing to do with spirituality, just being able to see. He referenced the Truman Show and said, it was like 2020 for him. It was like they took the dome off the top of the set, and you could see that everything was connected, and he was disgusted by it. And ever since then, he's been on this path towards trying to detach himself from all this corruption and all these things that he's participating in. He didn't realize it. Still an atheist, not looking at it spiritually, but he's on this trajectory to find a property. And that's the trajectory that my wife and I are on too, independently of each other. Before we met, we both wanted that because we saw where things were headed with this agenda. And maybe it doesn't even help to get yourself into a sustainable property, and we'll find out when that reality evolves, but at least it's something we can do that is not participating in the coming nightmare, right? So that gave me hope to see that someone that he hasn't been part of my life for 10 years, but he's on his own independent trajectory, having nothing to do with spirit. And it's the same way I'm heading, So it's like-minded people are all independently having these realizations all over the world right now. And as David Icke talks about all the time, it's happening in droves now after 2020. So what might seem like it could take hundreds or thousands of more years for people to finally wake up could be in the next 10 years for all we know.
Well, it's a race. If we just bring the conversation back into 3D physical conspiracy realms and out of the spiritual into what's happening in this place, it's a race between the sick, psychopathic so-called elites trying to put the final pieces in place of their New World Order master plan jigsaw puzzle. And there's only a few pieces now they need to slot in till the big picture is there. And the rest of us waking up, to use that term, to what's happening, and very importantly, standing up and rising up and taking steps to prevent it from taking place. I do feel that if everyone had just sat on their asses these past few years and done nothing, this plan would be much further ahead than it is. So it's obvious that large numbers of people have placed obstacles in the path of the plan. I mean, in 2020, when I saw what was happening, I thought, well, this is it now. The crazy, psychopathic bastards are going for it. They're just trying to take things full throttle to the final solution right now. But I think they've encountered a lot of problems. I don't think things have gone the way they hoped they would. I think by now they really wanted all of us not going anywhere in these little 15-minute cities, certainly not traveling overseas, passports and ID papers to do everything, more surveillance, more monitoring, a social credit system, limiting what you can do, where you can buy, reducing your points if you're a bad citizen, if you post YouTube videos that they don't approve of, much more internet censorship. I'm sure they still want to take things there. And I'm not saying that they won't try and push these things through, but if they'd had their way, all these things would already be in place. And the only reason they're not is because of the pushback that they've received from large numbers of people. I mean, I hate this country, Britain, so-called Great Britain, but I do have to give respect and kudos to the many, many people in this country, in this nation, that did stand up to the tyranny.
Mhm.
So I went on many of the marches in London in 2020 and 2021. And the ones in May and June of 2021 were absolutely incredible. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about the energy of those events. It was almost certainly in excess of 1 million people in
Wow.
London. The BBC said it was 400, being the liars that they are. But somebody placed a camera in a particular point in Oxford Street in the centre of London, and they just recorded people walking past in this rally. And they're all there to say, we stand opposed to tyranny. We're not having it, and we're not consenting to what you're trying to do. We see you. We know where you want to try and take things, and we're not having it. And this camera, uh, I think it went on for about 4 hours. So it was like people just walking past, walking past. It took 4 hours for all those people to pass that one point. That's how many people there were.
Wow.
And I think Britain was way ahead of other nations in terms of the visible pushback, people turning up in London, coming from all over the land and adding their voice to the sound of the crowd, adding their numbers so that anyone watching, whether it was government ministers or social engineers, psyop spin doctors, could get a very clear indication that all these people are not having it. We know what you're doing and we don't stand for it. So that pushback has caused things to not be as bad as they could be so far.
Mhm.
That spirit, that resolve has to continue. And that's what needs to be cultivated in people that have woken up since COVID, since 2020. You know, the ridiculous, absurd nature of the way society had got by that point caused these people to wake up out of their comas and start paying attention to things. But that energy has to be harnessed and it has to be put somewhere and used in some way. So, not people just sitting back saying, I know a lot of stuff now. It's no good you knowing a lot of stuff unless you do something with it. So, those events demonstrated what can happen when large numbers of people come together, concerned people who see where society is headed and don't stand for it, aren't with it. It just needs to continue. And yeah, I think the more difficult people's lives are going to become because they're certainly still pushing forward with all the surveillance, all the monitoring, all the restrictions on our freedoms. That's only going to get worse if they have their way. So that spirit of opposition has to continue. So yes, we are in for some very interesting years ahead. Not necessarily all bad, as you say. I think we're going to see some things that encourage us, maybe surprise us. But one way or another, it's a very interesting time in human history to be alive and to be witnessing, isn't it?
I agree. And as I mentioned in my email, this past year or so has been the hardest and most challenging and most rewarding of my life. And I've come to realize more and more that the harder things get, and I'm able to get through it and survive, the stronger I become. You know, there's that cliche that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think about the the opportunity of this life and the potential that's coming in the future for so many amazing things to happen. And none of it will be easy. And I wouldn't want it to be. That would be a lame story. You know, I want it to be hard. part, even though it sucks and it's hard, I'm in the moment, I'm like, fuck my life, I don't like this, but once I'm through it and I'm on the other end of it and I'm laughing at the weak person I used to be in comparison to who I've become, like all of that makes, again, I have a different perspective because of the experiences I've had of this all-encompassing love that makes evil seem insignificant in comparison, So I look at it all from that lens that all of these things have, no matter how inconceivable it might be in the moment, they all do have explanations that do have a thread that makes sense in the grand story. So I say bring on the challenge, that's what I'm here for. That's why I incarnated, if it was a
Right.
choice, which I don't think it was.
Right. Well, I don't think it was either.
Yeah.
You need to be able to change your standpoint on things as well, I feel.
Yeah.
So you get people that are born into religious families. Uh, not, I won't pick on Christians because I normally mention Christians. Let's say a Muslim family. So you're born in a part of the world which adheres to Islam. You're born into that kind of family. Your parents practice Islam. They go to mosque. Your grandparents did. You're probably going to do that with your life. And you're probably going to spend your entire life as a practicing Muslim because it's all you've ever known. So you're never going to change your viewpoint because it's just the way you've been conditioned and cultivated. But I think it's very important to be flexible with your outlook. So in my life, I've spent time as a Christian, I've spent time as an atheist, and I've spent a hell of a lot of time, excuse the pun, as an agnostic. And right now I'm an agnostic. I'm admitting that I don't know. I don't know what this place is all about. I've got my ideas and I may be right, but I may be wrong. So that's why I'm agnostic. And I've revised my viewpoints so many times on so many things, not just the religious, spiritual stuff, but even in my music industry research, I've changed my outlook on certain subjects that I write about there. So it's very important to be in a constant state of reevaluation. And every now and again, just consider your viewpoint, your spiritual standpoint, and just ask some questions and see if it stands up to that level of scrutiny. And be prepared to perhaps revise your outlook on things if you find that it's no longer answering the questions that it once did. Somebody born into one of those orthodox religious families is never going to go through that process or is very unlikely to just because of the way they've been conditioned. So the questioning, the constant reassessment is a very important part of having the most meaningful and enriched experience in these lives, I feel.
I agree 100%. I was raised Christian and it wasn't a huge influence on my life, but I was in a Christian orientation and I subscribed to the Jesus story until the day I saw Zeitgeist, like you.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yep. And then I was like, what? But that's the thing that was so liberating about watching that film was that Jesus went from being this weird, stupid story that didn't make sense to being this amazing concept that was stretched across all cultures. And it's not, like this. And then you go and start looking at all these different religions and see they're all talking about the same thing in different ways from different time periods. It's all one story, which is the hero's journey. It comes back around, like so I became more spiritual and more moral as an individual by beginning to question everything and not accepting the one story that I was raised
Right.
with.
Yeah. I'm
But yeah,
kind
I
of
would
gonna have to
say it
wrap.
gets harder and harder to do it the further along the path we get, right? Like we get
Right.
more and more sure of ourselves. So I really appreciate that perspective that it's, no matter how far along we go, we got to stay humble. We got to keep questioning. And the more sure we are, the more important it is to question.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to wrap it up now, brother, because I've
Sure,
got to
brother.
dive off. But yeah, great conversation. I'm
3:33 on the clock
right.
here. 3:33 in the morning.
There you
3:33.
go. Yeah, there's a message.
My wife wanted me to comment that should you be interested in having another conversation, she would love to be able to participate because she would love to speak with you too. So just throw that out there for the future.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a 2025 thing.
I didn't want to just surprise you and have her be here when we got on the call today, but she was excited. I was like, oh, I
Okay.
want to do that, but now let's do it another time.
Well, if we do it a few months down the line, who knows where I'll be at then?
Right on, brother.
I'll probably be on about God 25 by then.
Love it. Since God's infinite, keep going.
Right.
Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate the time, man.
Yep.
Keep going,
No
man.
worries.
I love what you're doing, obviously, and I appreciate you. You inspire me. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Good day, man.
Cheers.